moving in that direction is probably good for them, given that it's kind of this one-off match thing that Method EU hasn't spent too much time preparing.
I don't believe either of them play a ton of high keys on Live Realms.
They do.
Divine hasn't done keys in 2 seasons.
Okay, Divine hasn't, but Zamak and stuff have.
Okay, Zamak has for Perplexed, and then now has for Method EU.
I guess they do it together, huh? Anyways.
Anyways,
maybe my point is not.
There's a game underway. Siege of Boralus begins, my friends, as Perplexed is squaring off against Method EU. Our grand finals is here on our +20 Siege of Boralus.
All right, Tells, you ready to get into this grand final series and crack open a cold
All right, you're
one
gonna have
with
to
the
stop.
boys?
You're gonna have to stop that.
Non-alcoholic, of course.
Yeah. Anyway, so Method EU here and Perplexed doing the exact same strategy that we saw of both of them running in Siege of Boralus a little bit earlier on in the day. Perplexed does get their Shadow Meld skip off, whereas Method EU stops a little bit earlier, does their group meld, and then shrouds into the boss room. The difference in their comps here is, of course, Perplexed does have that Havoc Demon Hunter, whereas Method EU is running that Rogue. Swag Shot does end up going down to the first pull, though. Ooh.
Yeah, really unfortunate for them. I mean, Divine Field and Perplexed, these guys have had mistakes. This is where they messed up in Siege last time around. So, I don't know, they must have some jitters whenever they're playing against Method U, because it's really out of character for them.
Yeah, I mean, the Alliance side trash at the beginning of Siege of Boralus right here, exactly what we just saw from Perplexed, is incredibly dangerous. You have like these Black Tar Bombers and these Iron Tide Raiders, which can 100 to 0 you incredibly quickly, especially if you're not ready to get hit by any of those abilities, whereas Method U, they were able to get through the first pull without any hitches, and now they're on to Chopper Red Hook, according to what it says on screen currently. I do not know this guy's name, because I do not play Alliance, though.
It's the same boss, just a different name, it's all it is. So it's the exact same thing as the Horde version, but man, Method EU is just going to get a huge advantage right off the bat here, because that death on Swag Shot really is going to cost them. They don't have the battle res available for the next 8 minutes as well, so it's going to be rough for Perplexed already playing from behind in the first match of the grand finals. Not really where you want to be.
I mean, with it being on 20s, though, there's still a lot of room for many mistakes here to come. So Chopper Red Hook is going to be down by Method U here in a few seconds. You actually do see some of those mobs are CC'd off to the sides. I want to call them Vanguards, but they're not Vanguards. They're Alliance version of Vanguards, but they do the exact same ability.
Those are the Cleavers? Are the Cleavers
yeah, the
the
Cleaver
Vanguards?
is the Vanguard.
Interesting. It does the exact same thing. There's a frontal they have to dodge, but not really any of a problem for Method EU as Chopper Red Hook goes down. We're going to move on to the rest of the dungeon, which will stay the same between Alliance and Horde. Minus a couple extra mobs to the side that will probably see the tag.
So you see Method EU here pulling all these Marauders into this Wave Shaper. It looked like Frag walked off to the side there to distract that patrol of that officer. They're going to end up pulling that officer into the next pack. So here comes some bursting out from those Marauders, and that Wave Shaper, you actually do see it get binding shotted by one of the Hunters there. Xaylia able to heal through that 6 stack of bursting pretty cleanly. So here's the Commander, and now the next pack is going to be going down. Make sure that you don't get hit by any of the tramples from the Commander while that bursting is going out, otherwise you will perish. Method U does a really clean job of dealing with that, not rolling the bursting, making Xaylia's life the easiest possible.
I don't know why they'd want to do something good for their healer. I would have rolled that into a 5 stack the second I could and single target the other ones down, but maybe Method likes their healers more than I do. Fortunately, they only have to deal with that Commander there. They're doing a good job of stacking their bursting, just like you mentioned. But another random death on the side of Perplexed with Wolf Disco just randomly died. That's so weird. And he's on a Demon Hunter too, which is typically one of those classes that's just like.
I think he ripped Threat. No. I think he ripped Threat because he did a million damage before he died, and then the Marauders actually do that magic damage ability that will like hit you from range. I assume he just probably ripped Threat off Divine, and that's like the only thing that would make a lot of sense for me as to why he got.
That's so weird.
Like
It's not even skittish. I guess he is playing Fel Barrage, so there is the potential for him to actually rip a lot of AoE threat, like you're mentioning. We're going to chalk it up to that. Similar strategy coming out on that same trash pack for Perplex, getting the 4-stack bursting where they fall out and then slowly whittling down the other 2 mobs. But, because of that early on death, Method EU is just maintaining that steady 30-35
Yeah,
second
just
lead.
keep chugging along. All right, so you see the Marauders there start fleeing in terror. They end up rolling a 5-stack into a 6-stack of bursting, but Xaylia making sure that he pops his cooldowns, and they are able to deal with that quite quickly. They push the spotter to enrage. He will end up casting on one of their members there. You see that binding shot goes down on the Marauders, making sure that they don't flee. So here comes all of the kills, so the bursting stacks will be coming in quickly. You see Miraz uses his turtle pretty early, and there goes the bursting. Xaylia looking a bit dry on mana, so they'll probably stop to drink right after this pull, though.
Yeah, more than likely he'll try to get out of combat and start
Right
drinking
there.
instantly, like you mentioned. There he goes. Yep, perfect, getting that mana ready while everyone sets up for the next pull. It's important to mention, by the way, that just going up one key level, it increases the danger of the dungeon so much. Not only do the mobs have 10% more HP, but they also do 10% more damage. So if you look at the overall difficulty of the dungeon, that's a 20% increase in difficulty just from one level of Keystone. So the fact that these guys are still able to stay relatively clean, and I mean, on the side of Method EU, almost perfect so far, it's pretty incredible. They probably haven't practiced 20s that much outside of like maybe the couple of matches worth of time they had today.
I mean, I don't even know if I would, like, if I were in their shoes, straight up, I would not waste my time practicing 20s. Like, as weird as that sounds, I don't know if I would spend time practicing it. I mean, maybe if they have a significant amount of extra time.
Today,
yeah, sure.
right? That's about it, though. I don't think I would have practiced 20s before today. I think you're right on that front.
So exactly, it's just like time efficient. You have to like do a cost analysis of how time efficient it is. All right, so Method EU here is doing the trash pack in front of Dread Captain Lockwood, pulling it all the way straight into the boss, making sure that they dodge the frontal from that Cannoneer. That Cannoneer is actually incredibly dangerous. They also have those Crimson Swipe abilities that they also need to dodge, so a bunch of frontals that should be going onto the tank. So making sure that you are following closely behind your tank but not standing in front of them is important. Perplexed has made up some time from those issues that they had at the very beginning of the dungeon and trying to even it up, getting back to a similar point in where Method EU is, but unfortunately they do take this part of the dungeon just a little bit slower.
It's important to mention one of those difficulties of adding an extra 10% HP on top of every single boss is it's going to be interesting to see whether or not either of these two teams, or maybe both of them, is going to be able to still one-phase Dread Captain Lockwood even with that extra percent HP. You saw Method EU trying to get every single ounce of damage out on top of Dread Captain Lockwood as they possibly could, but Fragment's going down. Not quite sure. Maybe he got hit by one of the cannon barrages. They do have a battle res available for him, but this is going to be dangerous because you have to see Genji. He's channeling that unstable temporal engineering item, and Dread Captain Lockwood is down as well. So we're gonna have to see, once that energy bar fills up, gets to 100%, they're gonna have to do another intermission phase. So let's see if they're gonna be able to.
I mean, that's so bad for Frag. I bet he was probably sitting on buffs from Roll the Bones too, so he has to re-get a new buff, and then he has to just like set himself up to be able to like do an immense amount of damage. Outlaw Rogue not exactly known for insane amounts of single target. If that costs them a one phase, they could actually be pushed behind Perplexed, if Perplexed would be able to capitalize and one phase Dread Captain Lockwood. So that could be a tragic problem for Method U if they're not able to get a one phase on the boss.
Yeah, and you have to think about it, right? The rogue being dead, he probably didn't have any Roll the Bones buffs going into the boss coming down. He didn't have anything set up, no combo points, so that might have been the difference. The boss is at 10% for them. Now, of course, if you look at the side of Perplexed, if they're able to get the one phase in off the back of that, they're right back with Method EU, minus the 2 deaths on the board. But this could be really close. We'll have to see if they're able to come back and get that one phase, and it looks like they're doing a pretty
I mean, Wolf Disco ended up
right?
popping meta right there. You actually see the Fell Barrage coming out as well. So he was allowing his hunters to get like rapid reload and stuff like that to try to get a little bit more single target damage. You can see Dread Captain Lockwood's energy bar right below her health there. As soon as her energy bar hits 100, she casts a withdraw and jumps back on the boat. 7%, 6%. They need to start DPSing this down now.
They'll get it.
Okay, good Ring of Peace.
They have the Ring of Peace. Oh no! It was too early! They bring a piece at like 95 energy. If they bring a piece at like 98, 99, they could have given themselves an extra couple of seconds. I said they got it right before she ported, so obviously Caster Jinx, that's my bad, but man, that, you hate to see that. They were right back in the thick of it. That would have been probably, I don't know, 10 seconds after Method EU killed it, but now they have to do the entire extra intermission phase, and
that is like a 30-second loss right there, just because they have to play that intermission. That is so unfortunate for the side of Perplexed, especially since they committed all of their offensive CDs into being able to like make sure that that was actually going to work. Oh, that's just really heartbreaking.
That's really rough. You know, now I'm interested to see, are they going to go for the Huddle pull on 20?
I think you have to, right?
That would be interesting to see.
It's what you
I think you do.
You have to go for it.
Right. Yeah, you're absolutely right. I mean, if they're able to pull this off on their first try, or on their only try on broadcast, it'd be incredibly impressive. So let's keep an eye on Method EU now as they walk up towards Haddle's room here and probably go for the full boss pull with the entire room of trash.
Haddle or is it Hadal?
They're probably both fine, to be honest with you.
Anyways, all right, so you do see Method EU here pulling the boss, making sure that those two snipers off into the corner are trapped, as they are incredibly annoying to be able to deal with here. It is bursting and raging, so now we'll be in immense amount of danger once those mobs do start getting low. He will probably end up kiting them out, utilizing stuff like Binding Shot to be able to make sure that he's not getting meleeed by everything, as they do in fact enrage. So here comes the first tidal surge. Now is going to be standing, making sure that he is in cover. Everybody's going to make sure that they do not get by this wave. About here is where the pulls about to start getting really spicy.
Oh yeah, they need to start cleaving those mobs down quickly and focusing on the cleave, not just cleaving off the boss. You kind of mentioned, by the way, that tidal wave positioning for them was pretty nice considering where everyone else is in the room. They didn't have to really, panic and go to the other side of the room, so good positioning for them there. But this trash is going to start hurting. Remember, this is a raging dungeon. When everything gets below 30% HP, it does double damage. And on top of that, they have bursting stacks to deal with, so they can't actually kill it all at the exact same time.
He's light-footing.
Man, this has been
insane.
Look at
he's light-footing and running away from the
running.
boss. He's
just got to get away.
Okay.
Oh man, Gingy going down. The bursting stacks are ticking. It's a 3-stack. The bursting stacks are gone, and that was a perfect refresh, but Zalia needs to stay alive.
It's gonna be okay. Everything is okay. Do not panic.
Oh man, Fragments procs the cheat death. They still have the battle rose on the board, but they can't really use it while those commanders are still alive. Maybe they can get the res off right now? But man, if Method EU is able to get through this boss with that extra wipe on the board from Perplexed, they're firmly in the lead in this dungeon. I mean, this is insane.
Yes, the upgrade from a 19 to a 20. This is the difference here. Now cannot stay in melee for any longer. Has to Lightfoot Potion and run around with the whole entire trash pack, whereas Divine ends up going down. That is truly the difference between a 19 and a 20 on this dungeon.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, the fact that they're able to pull this off with just the one res, and they even had the Bloodlust available if they wanted it, but it didn't end up popping it. So, just, Method EU, man, they're just on another level.
So rough. All right, so they're going to actually be able to down Hadal here. Just the last mob ended up dying. They do still have those two snipers that are trapped off to the side, making sure that they deal with those. They do not have any Bloodlust, or not Bloodlust, Battle Res is available to them right now. They do have Bloodlust available. But, so, as long as they're able to get through Hadal in the next 5%, they do unlock their checkpoint back in his room, so everything will be okay as well.
Yeah, and if I'm not surprised, I wouldn't be surprised to see them completely shadow meld off those snipers because they just don't want to deal with the extra group damage. Just little small things that they're changing to make sure that they're not taking a bunch of damage. We've seen the strat here. Make sure you get the spotter down into its raging, area below 30%, and then you can use that sided artillery to kill all the rest of the trash you need in the dungeon.
God.
Shouldn't be too much harder on 20 to 19.
Man, I love Super Rocks.
I mean, honestly, when you think about it, in terms of which dungeons are not that big of a difference going from 19 to 20, Siege probably is the most similar one, purely because of the way you use the spotters in this dungeon.
I don't know what the Hadal pull is kind of monk-ass.
That's the only real difference, right? The big pull that you have to do, you have to really live through. And we saw how difficult it was. There were multiple people below 20% HP with bursting stacks on them that time. Cheat death popped, Gingy went down. It was a very scary pull, but yeah, they managed to pull it off.
Now, they have retooled and recouped, and now they're able to actually pull off that Hadal pull themselves. So at this point, they're basically hoping for a Method EU wipe, and then they would be able to strike and capitalize on a mistake there. The last boss, Vic Goth, with triple obelisk is always going to be a gamble as well, especially with, it's going to end up being Blood of the Corruptor. Is it Urgroth, Breaker of Heroes, and Boy Weaver Mouthy? I believe that those are the three that they have to deal with, so Tank Buster, Blob, and Caster. So they have to deal with all three of those. That can always be very dangerous on either side.
True, but I think Vidkoth is also, when you think about it, one of the easier bosses to get down. You deal with that gripping before a second demolishing terror spawns, and then you can kind of freely cleave down all three of the awakened mobs before you move on to the second platform and continue the fight, right? You're not constantly in danger with boss combat. You can kind of pick and choose when you want to move on with the rest of the fight. So again, probably one of the easier 20s to transition your 19 strat to. Still, you gotta respect it, like we said earlier, that it's just exponentially more difficult the higher you get in kills.
Well, yeah, it's just how the scaling of the dungeons ends up working out, unfortunately. It's how it is. So now you see Perplexed there has dealt with Kadal. Now they are going to start doing something very similar to what we've seen from Method U. Method U here using 3 immunities, Double Turtle and Cloak of Shadows, in order to be able to get rid of those bursting stacks before they are applied, and just deal with them really easily, as Zelia doesn't necessarily have the tools in his kit to be able to heal a double 10 stack, or a 10 stack of bursting on all 5 players, only on himself and now.
Yeah, and then it was still scary.
Exactly.
I mean, the amount that 10 stack was chunking was pretty spooky, but like you mentioned, not a big deal for them at all. And we'll see them very quickly clear up the last of the trash percentage they need using that artillery from the spotter. And once these are dead, they'll move on to Vikgoth, and we'll see how that awaken goes after finishing up the rest of the trash, of course.
Yeah, Swag ended up dying to something. I didn't actually see exactly what. I just saw him end up going down. He may have actually got shot by the raging snipers there. Which
true.
are very dangerous. Method EU, this is probably the last dangerous pull that they have to deal with here. You do see that they have that Tempest, making sure that you get that kick right there, as you do see, on that Revitalizing Mist cast. It's pretty important dodging the Banana Rampage. Now, Method EU is good to go, going to be downing that spotter, making their way towards Vikgoth, which they still have to play with Blood of the Corruptor, aka the Blob, Voidweaver Malthier, aka the Caster, and Urdroth Breaker of Heroes, aka I'm about to beat yo tank. So,
or your
Hunter Pet. Yeah, it's how it is.
I mean, it's a small thing from Method EU, right? They could have just instantly killed that spotter and, refreshed their bursting stack, which is probably what any of your typical Pug DPS would have done. But they sat there and waited. They knew Zelia was low on mana, and they knew it would make their lives easier to get back to this section of the dungeon. Not having that extra stack rolling. I think they could have rolled a 4-stack into a 5-stack incredibly easily there. But it all comes down to this for Method EU as they pull Vikgoth. Bloodlust will be popped, and we're going to see them focus down this first Gripping Terror as quickly as possible before moving on to the 3 Awakened mobs. And once that's done, it's just the boss left over, and it's pretty easy.
Yeah, so something that they actually do is they all start on that right side Gripping Terror, so it allows now to do a little bit more damage to it. In addition to that, it positions everybody to where Voidweaver Malthier will come all the way onto this platform with the group, making it significantly easier for them to get kicks on it. Otherwise, you'd have to use double ranged kick if he wasn't going to make it all the way to the platform to make sure you lock the spider out of both schools of magic before it would end up moving, which would be incredibly costly.
Yeah, because once you've used both of your range kicks, you'll miss 3 kicks from them because your Hunter's kick cooldown won't be back off of cooldown, so they would have had to let 2 casts in a row through, which could result in somebody instantly being killed. So, yeah, good positioning again from Method EU, and like we mentioned, once the first set of tentacles is down, they're going to not use the cannon right away, and they're going to spend that time cleaving down the remaining 3 Awakened mobs before they move on to the rest of the fight.
Absolutely. So ultimately, they're going to be downing this Blood of the Corruptor to give them a little bit more space on the platform. Frag goes and takes a bath a little bit, gets knocked away. Ginji's starting to drop really low. Zelia is starting to get close to low on mana, but these 3 Awakened mobs should be dying shortly. As long as Ginji gets topped before the next debuff comes out, he should be okay, but this is kind of scary.
There was some being knocked around with those debuff dispels there. I'm not quite sure what happened there, but
Ginji
may
die.
Ginji has a debuff and he's incredibly low. He might die here. This is really spooky. He needs to get some heals. I mean, okay, there they come. He's now in a safe position, but that was really scary right now. And look at this. Zelia's just about completely doomed now. 10 to 15% mana left. But of course, once these Awakened mobs are down, all they have left to deal with are those debuffs.
Yeah, Miraz now gets targeted by the debuff on Vikgoth. He does, in fact, have his Hunter heal. I do not remember the name of it. All right, he presses it right there. Exil. Yeah, exactly. He presses his Exil. Now Ginji and Miraz are both kind of in danger of dying if they get targeted with another Vikgoth debuff, especially with Zelia super low on mana. But all of the Awakened mobs have gone down, and now it should be fine, ultimately, because now the pull...
Oh, Miraz. Okay,
nice turtle.
That was a little spooky. Miraz was in the cannon and got the boss debuff right when he came out of the cannon, so he was out of range of his healer for a second there, had to commit his turtle there just to make sure he stayed alive. That was a spooky moment for them, but it looks like they're more than pretty stable right now. We'll have to keep an eye on these next set of debuffs. If Ginji and Fragnus get targeted with either of those debuffs while they're low, could be spooky, but everyone's all topped up now, and they'll be able to finish the second Gripping Terror off.
Perplexed is actually at a similar point in which Method EU is. Unfortunately, the key difference here is the 12 deaths between the two teams. Unfortunate circumstances have left Perplexed slightly behind where Method EU is. I'm kind of surprised with how close it actually has ended up being.
Give me a second to get this cannon working.
Yeah, I mean, it's not like Method EU's been the paragon of consistency with their strat. I mean, we saw just then on this second platform when they were finishing off those 3 Awakened mobs, there were some very scary moments where either Genji or Fragmus could have gone down due to those debuffs because of how low Zalia's mana is. But after kind of finishing off that second platform, Zalia's mana is in a position where he should be more than capable of healing through this final platform, and we should see Method EU taking this first series. All they gotta do is take down this final Gripping Terror, take that final cannon shot, and they'll be up 1-0.
So something I really like there is now is the person who fires the cannon on that second platform there. That big demolishing tentacle will not hull crack until after his first slam, so now knows that, and he allows all of his DPS to sit here, standing and delivering on this Gripping Terror, making sure that they end up popping parry and other defensive abilities on the second demolishing terror that ends up spawning, and then somebody will hop in the cannon, fire the cannon, Vic Goth will be over, and they do not have to down any of the demolishing terrors, saving themselves some time, saving themselves some damage, and taking the first match versus Team Perplexed.
Also, we really get a good highlight of how dangerous it is going up 1 key level. That extra damage from dots on bosses, some of the charges that we saw from some of the commanders going out, all that extra damage there, in particular, the Dranos is just so terrifying.
I mean, it adds up when you have these pulls that you've practiced and you've honed the exact maximum amount of enemies that you can fight on a level 19 key, and then the keystone level increases and their health and damage increases by 10%. You know, that they've pulled enough in these pulls that 10% more health and damage. If they could have lived that, they would have added more stuff into the pull in the 19, right?
Exactly.
We saw both teams really contending with really getting over the line of what they can reliably do, and whether or not they were able to react and, you know, do those dangerous pulls even at that level of difficulty.
And as you were talking about before, it's ironic. Siege doesn't seem like it's as big of a step up compared to some of the other dungeons, which could be, or even some of the different affix combinations as well. But I think they also got a pretty good gut check of like what to expect for the rest of the series.
I mean, we were talking about that, how it should be one of the easier dungeons to go up a dungeon level in, but looking at the time trial times for this dungeon, Method EU's time trial time here was 15:08 on 19. Almost 5 minutes slower on 20 just from that 1 key level. Really goes to show you how much these guys have min-maxed their strats for 19s. Their cooldowns are planned out. They even go so far as to just plan when they use their trinkets and individual cooldowns. You know, when your rogue uses his blade flurries. These guys have everything mathed out, and just going up 1 keystone level really throws that all off.
Yeah, in addition to that, like there's like small, like very large things that you would expect to do, like one phasing Dread Captain Lockwood on a 19 that you just okay, it's like 1 percentage point difference of whether or not Perplexed one phases Dread Captain Lockwood or not. So there's some things that it will end up costing you a ton of time.
That's right. So let's start digging into some of the replay on that. Let's start seeing where teams were taking it slower here.
Yeah, so really the crucible of this match was in that third boss room, the Hadal Dark Fathom room. That was where Perplexed, you know, they were fighting there. They were fighting the same pool they usually do, and they ended up starting to have deaths. And unfortunately, one of the early deaths they had was on Divine Field himself, and that meant that they were unable to really recover that pull and pull it back together with battle reses because, you know, the aggro went on everybody. Nobody had a fast cast B-res, so they were left really in a bad situation with no way to save themselves there, and just kind of a slow, painful wipe unfolded after that. Meanwhile, Method EU also had difficulty with that same pull. They had some deaths as well, but their deaths were concentrated on DPS players instead, and that meant that they could, you know, stabilize, recover, and then battle res, which is a huge difference there. That ended up being many minutes of difference between the two teams from who died and whether or not they were able to recover in that third boss room. The fourth boss fight as well, that was something where, you know, every other part of the dungeon, Perplexed was really starting to catch up, but in that fourth boss fight room, even though things started to get sketchy for Method EU, there were a couple spots where players started to drop really low. They were able to hold it together, and they were able to get to the end of that platform and shoot that cannon, which is how they won that match.
Without question. And this also gets the conversation more towards the next dungeon, which is going to be looking to be on Freehold. And this is also going to be an incredibly interesting one, not only because, shocker, it's again a time trial map, here's ironic, but also I'm curious as to whether Method EU has had a chance to hone their strategy to copy what Perplexed has done earlier in the weekend. Absolutely
true. If there's any team of players that could figure out that strat and play it, you know, I think it's these guys.
It's Method EU.
It goes to show you that They chose to ban Workshop instead of this, and they've also had the opportunity to practice this dungeon on 20 instead of 19. Perplexed has had to play for the past couple hours, so we don't even know, or they probably don't even know if their strategy is possible to do it on 20 because of the extra damage intake on their tank. So we'll just have to see what happens. I'm interested to see how it plays out.
Zamak was tweeting at me saying that strategy, kiting all those awakened mobs, is actually just the most scary thing imaginable too.
I would imagine so. And that's just where pretty much all the dungeon gets put onto one player, making sure they can start dodging as many enemies as they can at the very end of the run, really. And we've seen time and time again where teams need to be able to perform at the very end of the dungeon, because that's really where all the pressure is. You know, even if the other group just started Vikgoth, for example, right as the other group's about to fire a cannon, if you have one wipe, there's no way you're able to catch up. If you have too many deaths, for example, you're not able to kill the tentacles in time. That causes all kinds of other problems. So it really shows, especially for MDI, how snowbally a lot of these games can be, is ironic, but also about how important it is to keep calm while you're playing.
Absolutely. It's definitely a big mental game, and these guys are definitely two of the best at it. You know, especially in an online environment where you have a good idea of where the other team is in relation to your team, it's really good to have that information, but also you don't really want to get tilted by it either. You know, a lot of it is just keeping a calm mental attitude, like you mentioned. Even if you make mistakes, like you mentioned, well, you mentioned a lot of this already, but even if you make mistakes, the other team can make a mistake too. You can always come back in the dungeon. You can kind of seesaw, and we've seen a lot of that this weekend. Generally not with these two teams, but looks like we're ready to get going on this Freehold here.
Against a lot of their opponents, certainly.
Looks like a false start.
We see one team already starting. We
false
might add
start.
a little bit of a false start, so we gotta run it back a little bit there and make sure everybody comes on in together. Are you alright there, Tennis?
Travis and I are just laughing at the same joke.
Yeah, we are.
Tettles, I have a request from him Fired Up to stop giggling because it makes him giggle.
I cannot control whether or not I giggle. I must be honest with you.
That's adorable that you guys are giggling together.
Stop that.
Interesting.
All right. Everybody had a false start right there, so they were just making sure that we're able to sync the teams together once again. Make sure that everything is going to be on exactly the same page before we get started. So this is the grand finals. The dungeons are scaled up to the plus 20 level instead of the plus 19 for this grand final. So we have to have Tyrannical, Bolstering, and Explosive. And while I don't think there's too much in terms of route differences that we would see is ironic, how much are we expecting boss differences and maybe extra pressure on these teams to watch their feet on the bosses?
It's hard to say, because Freehold is generally speaking one of the more difficult dungeons when it comes to bosses, and you have to remember this is a Tyrannical dungeon. I think they've got it mathed out whether or not they can live on a 19. I'm not really sure. Do you live one shot to the face on a 20 Tyrannical? Dratnos or Titles, you guys would be much more versed in that. Or do you have to start LOSing?
I think that's when stuff
the
starts
shots down?
going bad. Yeah, I think the 19 to 20 line is basically where it matters. But I'm not sure, given the exact tournament realm gear, how much defensives they're looking at.
Exactly. I mean, they do have all of their neck traits for their additional health points. I think that they should still be able to live. I think the break point is like 21 Tyrannical. But even still, like if you get comboed by any, like the Parrot Guano or just like aren't completely top.
I have corruption.
I have corruption even, yeah. You just instantly die. So there could be some differences between 19 and 20. I guess we'll see if people get 100 to 0.
You guys know if we've had any deaths just because of the thing from beyond, and like that was the killing blow? I don't think that we've seen it just yet.
Don't think so.
I'm prepared
I
for
don't think
it.
so yet, but I'm ready.
Very much prepared for it, and it looks like the teams are as well. As Method EU is up 1 right now against Perplexed in our grand finals, the plus 20 dungeons, the time trial dungeons as well. Start seeing, and maybe it all starts coming down to who can kite the obelisks best at the end of the dungeon. Our second game of the series is underway in Freehold.
All right, I'm looking forward to this soon, and we're already seeing the differences in strategy between these teams once again. We know Method EU likes to skip all the trash at the starting instance and get right into the boss room, whereas Perplexed likes to get about 14% of their trash from these first 3 packs.
Yeah, I think that as long as they make sure that the Enforcer dies evenly with the rest of the pack, this is not exactly the most inefficient things, especially since they'll have stuff. Like, they will end up using, like, the Rogue will have an additional buff because he is talenting in and out of, I don't even remember what it is, but they press AR and they get like a free 2 stack of roll the bones, free 2 buff. So they have like additional buffs at the very beginning that they are gaining. So I don't think that's necessarily too bad of a strategy from Perplexed right there. Whereas Method EU, there is definitely a reason that they are running straight into this trash pack. They're looking to get a little bit more trash percent and trash count later on.
Yeah, also, one of the no major differences to look at is the fact that we're seeing double Hunter on the side of Method EU versus 1 DK, 1 Hunter on the side of Perplexed. We're going to see more single target damage out of Method EU in general on bosses outside of when the DK has Army of the Dead available. And we're going to have to see if that comes into play, because remember, this is a tyrannical dungeon, and honestly, you know, the Army of the Dead with Bloodlust for the DK might not even be enough to outdamage the extra Hunter for Method EU.
Yeah, but I think the 4th Obelisk generally will be a little bit better as long as Perplexed is able to pull that strategy off, especially if Method EU is only playing triple Obelisk.
Yeah, I agree with that completely. You can see, I mean, they're even committing their shout to making sure nobody goes down in that first phase. 20 Tyrannical is very spooky. Now, of course, there's only 3 real targets that are in danger here. Neither of the Hunters should ever get hit by one of the target shots, so the people you're looking at for the method side of Method EU are going to be both of the melee players and the tank. That's the healer, monk, the rogue, and the tank. And then on the side of Perplexed, they got a little bit more crowded melee over there.
Exactly. Both teams do end up using their Bloodlust on this first boss. Wolf Disco was doing 30k DPS, and then Bloodlust got popped. He popped Army of the Dead, and now has jumped up to 137k DPS on the boss. Whereas on the side of Method EU, the Hunter duo kind of slapping the boss around a little bit. So Perplexed is actually catching up, though, even though they did do a full trash pull ahead.
So it looks like one shot does about 75 to 80% of their HP if they don't have any shields, which is kind of spooky. Ooh, that's scary. If Zalia gets shot right now while he's in that Wano, he could go down. There's the shot. He healed himself to full right before getting shot. I mean, that could have been incredibly spooky there. Great heads up. Just stop, really like quick healing from him.
So look right there. Method EU actually has pulled a couple of mobs on top of Sky Captain Crag. It says Corsairs that will patrol around. I believe that there's one of the healing mobs that's also, and I don't remember exactly the name of it. But the double Corsairs, the notable ones that are in that pack. So they are just making sure that they do kill Sky Captain Crag pretty evenly with those mobs. The Bonesaw, that's the healer guy. I couldn't remember what his name was. But yeah, so they end up DPSing those down evenly to make sure that nothing gets bolstered. Whereas for the side of Perplex, they're taking something that is a more safe strategy. They have to kill fewer explosives, and they're just like standing and only hitting the boss there. So it's a little bit inefficient, but there is less damage that has to go into explosives.
Right. Well, they really wanted to make sure they didn't bolster the boss at all there, because they were already taking 80% of their HP with a non-bolstered shot. 1 or 2 bolsters, you're talking 100 to 0 even with shields. So yeah, very, very careful to make sure no bolstering went out, but a little bit of extra efficiency from Method EU, and that's kind of their bit. We've been talking about it all tournament. They find ways to find mob count in places where nobody else would really even bother going for it. So good on them. They finished the boss first, and they're only 4% behind in trash, so I think Method EU is very ever so slightly ahead in the dungeon, and I'm pretty sure as we see both teams doing the same thing, Rogue has now started the Trothak RP.
Both of their rogues ended up running ahead, vanishing off combat from the boss, and then ends up getting that pig spawn so that they can instantly click it. Just saves them a few seconds overall, especially relative to how much damage the rogue would be getting from the boss. Ashine should be walking back up here shortly. Method EU is already engaged in combat in the boss, whereas Perplexed is looking to pull a bunch of mobs on top of this Crusher. So they need to cleave off of the Crusher, otherwise it will get bolstered. So basically, for those who don't know, Crushers, whenever they die, will not bolster other mobs, but other mobs, whenever they die around the Crusher, will bolster it. So.
Right, so yeah, they're really making sure to single target that down. So perfect bolstering execution once again from Perplexed. They're playing really well in this dungeon so far. We did finally see a thing from beyond there in the middle of that pack explode, but not any real major damage going out. But explosive going off on top of that, group kind of dropping low, but it looks like Zamak with his big brain has got it under control, and they'll probably end up moving on to the council captains right afterwards. But Method EU already about halfway done with the boss.
I noticed earlier, and I actually find incredibly funny. Zalia is running the strength trinket from Temple of Sethralus, Merekthus Fang, whereas Zamak is not running that. The strength trinket does an immense amount of AoE damage. It's like the green breath thing. So Zalia foregoing intellect for a strength trinket. So really the interesting series of events.
Huh.
I mean, you see Demon Hunters playing it.
Yeah, you do see it all the time. It makes sense, they're just going for the any massive amount of damage they can get, so it makes total sense. I mean, I would like to go back and see if any other healers actually ran something like that, because that's also pretty big brained.
Yeah, Zamaka is currently playing just a different unused trinket. I believe is like Medallion or something like that. Badge, maybe. Yeah, Corrupted Gladiator's Medallion. So he was playing a different unused trinket, something that probably amps up his Way of the Crane a little bit more. Method EU here has pulled some trash. You actually did see somebody get gripped in by the Harpooner there. Whenever Captain Jolly does end up going down, Eudora will stay active for a few seconds. You hope that they got a bad brew there, and if all the mobs stood in that bad brew, then all of the trash will end up getting exploded. I assume that they got a bad brew by how quickly that trash just died right there.
That was
Look at
actually
damage.
Insane how quickly it all died. And
With the
Zalia,
breath.
that's definitely the trinket,
dude.
the breath, man. Both Zalia and Now's channeled their trinkets at the same time there and did a massive amount of damage with it. That was insane to get that bad brew RNG, which we assume, I mean, it had to be, right? Everything died so evenly. And on top of that, just cleaving it down with the boss so evenly, so perfectly, that was beautiful.
What else is like super important about that is, in addition to that, Eudora will still continue to stay active, stunning mobs while you're still in combat post-boss, and she will only go away after combat fully fades.
True, yeah. So they actually you keep getting extra brews for a little while afterwards. Divine Field actually ends up going down, but Captain Jolly is at 5%, so they should technically be able to finish this pull off. But that's just 5 seconds on the board and maybe a little bit of inefficiency as people have to kite around so as not to die. That's, small things whenever Method U is playing the way they are, they're really going to have to pull out all the stops in this dungeon to come back.
He charged into that Whirlpool of Blades, which is unfortunately going to make you die immediately.
And die he did. We're going to see Method EU moving on to that Trothak room, pulling a lot of trash, also with one of those crushers, making sure they have to focus that down. And it looks like, wow, I mean, is Perplexed going for it? It looks like they're clearing the same amount of trash. They're clearing that same circle of trash, so we'll have to keep an eye on them. I think they're going to go for it. I think they, with the way they played in the dungeon, they kind of think, I'd be surprised if they didn't go for it, because they probably think
look
they
at the
have
difference
to.
in trash count right now, too. So even though Method EU seems like they're significantly ahead of Perplexed, Perplexed is 15% trash count higher. So this is actually a fairly even match currently. Maybe Method EU is slightly ahead. It's kind of hard to tell. Ultimately, I think it's going to come down to the last, 30... ultimately, it's going to come down to the last, 20 to 30 seconds of the dungeon, because Perplexed running that very interesting strategy of, get me away from these mobs.
That is a pretty good strategy, I have to say. Yeah, so, it's rough, but...
Yeah, I was about to say, Crusher into Ludwig is pretty nice. So with Bolstering, whenever the Crusher dies, if it dies before Ludwig does not get bolstered by the Crusher, because like I was stating earlier, the Crushers will not bolster enemy mobs. I don't know why. But so there a lot of times during bolster weeks, you will actually pull these Crushers because they're efficient relative to other weeks whenever they're significantly inefficient. Big pull coming in from Method U, though.
Yeah, they're just clearing more of this trash in the central area. I don't know if they want to pull that Crusher as well. They probably don't need to, because the trash percentage is, as we see them running away.
Explosive going off.
1% HP. And an explosive going off. This is a spooky moment for Method EU on this massive pull, but it looks like they're just barely going to get everyone back to topped just fine. So yeah, spooky moment. You saw Zalia literally on those target frames, 1% HP. He shouldn't be alive.
Yeah, they got a really unfortunate explosive spawn way off to the side, and they were not line of sight of it. So it ended up going off and dropped everybody sub 30% health. They are very fortunate that nothing bad happened beyond that. That is a large scrapper. They're making sure to DPS down everything evenly. You see the binding shot coming out to try to make sure that Now does not get meleeed to death. Perplexed has down Ludwig von Tortolin, 1% trash count ahead of Method EU, whereas Method EU has downed all of their trash, and they are starting Trothak currently.
Yep, they are starting Trothak. They've already got Ludwig down, so we're going to see them... they've almost caught up on that trash percentage, but then again, Perplexed is doing the pull that Method EU just pulled off, that massive AoE pull where Zalia almost died. So they'll probably get up to about 76, 77% trash off of that, and then move on to Trothak right afterwards. Really what it's going to come down to is going to be what Method EU is going to be doing for the rest of the trash percentage that they have to make up, and then also whether or not either or both of the teams are going to go down. But Zalia has died. They have a battle res available for him, but they have to make sure that they get that shark kited out. We're going to wait for this shark toss to go out first, and then whichever hunter does not pick up the shark is probably going to res Zalia.
Right there, the shark goes out. The shark is on Genji, so Miraz is walking over to Zalia's body. Okay, actually Zalia already got res. I'm rolling. Yeah, never mind. I see that now. Oh, yeah.
I think I trolled you there.
Oh,
I trolled you there. It's okay.
To be honest. Okay, Perplex is also now on the Trothak, the shark puncher.
Oh yeah. So we can see, you know, where the teams lie right now. 12% trash on the board for 30% of the boss's HP. That's the difference right now. Not quite sure which one is in the lead right now, as it is a Tyrannical dungeon, so that 30% HP on the boss is actually a massive amount of health. But really what it comes down to, like we mentioned before, is where that trash percentage comes from for Method EU.
Okay, so speculating for a little bit, I would assume that it's going to come from the pack that's next to Harlan's Suite. I think it's only assumption to say that they probably do it before. Okay, so no, actually, here's where the trash comes from. I found it. I lied. I found the trash. It's on Method EU's screen right now.
Oh, hey, there it is. Isn't that a little early, though? Trothak is still pretty high.
Oh, okay.
I feel like that's got to be a little bit
I guess it depends
early.
on what you're cleaving off of, right? If you're cleaving off of Trothak, it's probably fine. If you're not, then it's dangerous. So there are some scrappers and some knuckle dusters in that pack. So that pack is the patrol, and it's normally not that bad, especially whenever they don't have any harpooners in it. Sometimes there are harpooners in the pack depending on what RP event is active, but with the Brood there are none in that pack. So that pack is actually fine to pull with Trothak. Getting gripped into Sharknado, though, in other weeks would cause teams to perish, but Method EU devising an excellent strategy where Perplexed here has a Crusher currently on the screen.
Yeah, a little bit less efficient because, you know, when you only have 2 targets available, you don't get access to that rapid reload for the hunters. Although they are only running 1 hunter, so it's not as big of a deal for them as it would be for Method. But man, Method made me eat my words pretty easily. They were just completely passively cleaving those down. I don't think there was any focus AoE going on, just keeping up Beast Cleave and probably Blade Flurrying, and they're going to go down about 5 to 10 seconds after the boss, so perfect execution there from Method EU, and only 9% behind on trash right now. Well, Perplexed still has to deal with 30% of the boss's HP.
I still wonder where they're going to get that count from. So I think they have to be clearing out that middle pack that's near Harlan's Suite. Otherwise, it doesn't make any sense as to where else they would get it.
Oh, maybe we're just going to see the old typical strategy. No, we can't.
Bolstering,
it's Bolstering.
exactly.
Never mind.
You can't
use the
cannonball barrage
cannons.
them because it's Bolstering. Maybe they still cannonball barrage it and just do it at the very last minute. The reason that I assume that
it's still scary,
exactly.
though.
I agree with that. The reason I assume that they cleared it out early is because it gives them significantly more room to kite the Blood of the Corruptor around and kite all the rest of the Awakened Obelisks around. But still going to be missing some.
So we now see that Method EU does actually have a lead at the current state of the dungeon, and probably will continue, even though Perplexed will catch up in trash percentage here. Because Method EU is able to pull the boss right now, I'd say that they're still slightly in the lead, but it looks like Method EU isn't going to be doing any kiting shenanigans. They're just going to be killing these obelisks all together with Bloodlust executing. But they've got all 4.
So they have to actually kill that middle pack with a cannonball barrage from Harlan at the very end of Harlan. And if he does get bolstered like a couple of times, then they could actually just completely lose the run. So it's very important to make sure that everything is going to go smoothly here. Getting down that Blood of the Corruptor first is probably going to be their key focus, and the reason for that is just because of how small the area that you already have to deal with Harlan is prior, that they need to make sure that it goes down early. So you actually do see it. It is getting killed quickly.
And Miros just got chunked to 30% HP there. Zalia also getting chunked by the crippling. They are so close to being in aggro range of that middle pack, but once the Blood of the Corruptor goes down, they can actually move into the center of the room. Gingy has to be super careful with his positioning there, but that was almost textbook. Do they have a way to get rid of these fears here? I don't see if they do or not. Okay, he is able to actually position himself to not get feared towards the middle pack, so it looks like he's going to be fine with that fear, and they're going to try to get the Beckoner Chaos down before that next group fear comes out.
So Perplexed here, doing the tried and true patented, I'm going to run away with these Awakened Mob strategy that we saw previously that Zamak was doing. So now they are actually just DPSing down only Harlan. All of their single target DPS is going into Harlan, whereas Method EU still needs to cannonball barrage that middle pack. I think this is going to be the win for Perplexed as long as Zamak doesn't end up going down. So they need to make sure that all of their DPS, so a Shine can roll, I think it's True Bearing, that's the heal. Actually, no, True Bearing's not.
The attack speed slash leech.
I think True Bearing may be the attack speed slash leech. Wolf Disco does in fact have Death Strike to keep him up. Swag is the only one who's in like super big danger, but Zamak died! That means that, oh my gosh, the Awakened Mobs instantly teleported all the way back to the group. This is going to be a wipe for Perplexed. Method U is going to win the match, I think.
Wow. I mean, you were talking about it. Smock was saying on Twitter that pull is incredibly dangerous to pull off even on a 19. I can't imagine how much more dangerous it is on a 20 with, you know, your entire group having to keep each other up. We even saw like literally one Eye of Corruption for Ashine took him down to like 40% HP. And it's not like he has any good way of getting rid of that outside of, you know, his cloak and the actual Cloak of Shadows. So once those are gone, there's not much you can do there. It looks like we're just going to have an easy win for Method EU. And I'm actually still curious, you know, where are they going to get the last of their trash from? Are they just going to cannon barrage them, you know, at the final 5 or 10%?
10%, it has to be that middle pack that's right there. They're going to be doing it like probably whenever the boss hits about 20, maybe a little bit lower, like 20-ish% because he's already in that range where he's taking increased damage, so he should be a little bit easier to deal with. Swag ends up going down to explosive right there. That's
here's the question that I have at this point though. Your Method EU, right? You've got to know about a minute and a half after whatever is going on for you. You have to know that Perplexed is wiped at this point, right? The second you know that, I feel like there's no reason to go for the cannon barrage in the middle pack. You should just kill the boss, because if you do wipe to Harlan Sweet, you have to deal with the 4 obelisk pull again with no bloodlust, and there's no way you're living that without bloodlust, right? So I feel like they just have to play. They should play it safe here. It's the right call to make.
Zamok died instantly again.
Oh,
yeah,
Zamok
he got hit by the
instantly
Spirit Breaker and could not live it with the Life Cocoon. Ends up going down. This is going to be another wipe for Perplexed. Whereas Method EU here, 15% on the board. So now they just need to procure.
Yeah, they're just playing it safe.
10%.
They're just playing it safe.
Yeah.
Where are they? Where are they? They stopped damage. They're not doing any more damage to the boss here.
So look, they're
It was a 10%
they're
for a
positioning
while.
themselves to be able to. Here we go. Yeah. Okay, so they were just making sure that Harlan was going to be in a position where he's just going to die almost regardless of whether or not they mess it up.
Oh, dropping low.
It's going to be okay. Like they're still at least going to get some count from it. Whereas
Harlan goes down.
Fine.
That is going to be all she wrote. One more mob is all it takes. And with this last trash mob, Method EU are returning to their winning ways and unsurprisingly taking the first cup of the 2020 MDI season.
Method EU, despite those challenging +20, the big step up, and we just saw the difference right there of the challenges and not being able to survive some of those pulls with the obelisks mobs at the very, very end.